coming up on this episode of the Awake and Aware podcast?
I started pretty late. I think it was probably out of spite to my dad at the time, because he was so into it, and that's all he sort of talked about. I just didn't. I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't mesh with it. I guess when you're looking at it, and I think especially because I started late as well, I didn't have that many contacts. I didn't have that, like, you know, going through all these different coaches and really like trying to make state teams and really like, you know, moving forward. Like I'm pretty sure I didn't even make my school team. I had a go at him. Like I was the only person to actually stand up and just be like, this is wrong. And in front of everyone, like I took my moment, I guess, after a training session when he was sort of like talking to everyone, and I just like called him the biggest scammer. Like you play with like kids' dreams. Like I just took it all off my chest. Like I just said it all. And his response was like, to one of the other coaches co-running the residency or whatever, he's like, make sure you take his passport. Like we don't fuck around here.
Welcome back to the Awake and Aware podcast. Today we're bringing it back for number 7. Today's guest, Alan Deriard from the Elite Football, number 1 player agency in Australia. So mate, thank you for coming on today and spending your valuable time with us today in the studio.
No, thank you for having me, Lockie. And look, awesome. This setup is so cool. And I reached out to you because I don't know, like just the content and the way you sort of express yourself. And honestly, I think it's pretty above standard from other podcasts that I've looked at.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. It's definitely been a long sort of journey, so to speak. You know, with everything coming together and it's all sort of panning out in the way it's supposed to, which is really, really nice as well. And I was actually really, when you first messaged me, I didn't know how to take it, because it was like just so like sort of left field, because I don't really have people reach out to me. Well, I have a lot of people reach out to me, get into the pod, but not like sort of in a position where you are. So it's sort of like, I just gotta, you know, give it a chance and be a bit more open-minded, whereas, you know, I usually reach out to people as well. But no, I love what you're doing, man. And for the audience today, start off by bringing it back to, you know, the evolution of like the football academy, your childhood through sport and everything like that. So give us a bit of a rundown on your resume.
Yeah, awesome. So yeah, I guess for people who don't know me, the classic spiel is look, I'm a full-time football agent. I'm the co-founder of Elite Football, which currently we are Australia's number 1 play agency. We work with over 25 professional clubs overseas, and it's been a bit of a long journey. We've been doing it for about 8 years now. But yeah, if we were to bring it back to, I guess, the inception of it, don't want to bring it too far back, but I was just like a normal kid. I think as you do, you've played sport, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you know, being like 15, 16, 17, when you're at that age of got the dream of going professional, and I want to sort of take this as a career and see where I can sort of go with it. And unfortunately for football specifically in Australia, there's just, the avenues are just pretty poor. There's no real, you know, funnel or way for an amateur player to actually be like, okay, these are the stepping stones I need to make, because, you know, there's a lot of nepotism in Australia. There's a lot of politics. I mean, that's around all business, but especially I think in the football in Australia. And so really it was just a boy with a dream wanting to go overseas, and, you know, went over and had very, very bad experiences, and realized just how hard it was. And I just felt like it was harder than necessary. And yeah, that's where we're at.
Was the dreams always to go professional in football? Or I know you said the avenues in Australia are very slim, which I can relate, because I played baseball growing up from, I think it was age 5 until hell, even 16, 15. And like the baseball and football like in Australia is just like not really existent. Whereas if you go overseas, that's where you make a lot of the money, the potential, the drafting, all that sort of stuff. And so when you're coming up through your, I guess, athletic career, was the first time you got to the pitch, was that like, I want to do this forever? Or was like, what was the sort of the concept in your own mind when you you know, latched onto the football, onto the game?
Yeah, so look, honestly, I was a pretty late bloomer. So I didn't even start playing football till about like 15.
Yeah, okay, wow.
And so that's really late. Most start at like 8, 9, even younger. I think your videographer James was saying he started like 6. So
Yeah. And you're carving them up, eh?
Yeah. So look, I started pretty late. I think it was probably out of spite to my dad at the time, because he was so into it, and that's all he sort of talked about. I just didn't. I don't know, for whatever reason, I didn't mesh with it. But yeah, I started late, and I guess when you're looking at it, and I think especially because I started late as well, I didn't have that many contacts. I didn't have that, like, you know, going through all these different coaches and really like trying to make state teams and really like, you know, moving forward. Like I'm pretty sure I didn't even make my school team like the first couple of years, you know, and so I did have a lot against me, to be fair, and I didn't do as much as I probably should have done, right? But at the same time, I ended up doing a lot more than other people in those short years.
Yes.
So I think it was more for me, like with football, it's just cloudy. Like there's so many different sections that the football works in Australia where they're not working together, and so it's not like, oh, you're the best player and so you're going to get the chance. Like it just doesn't work like that. You know, the dream you'd think is, okay, well, if you're doing the numbers or if you're doing XYZ, you should slowly move up the ranks, right? But unfortunately, that's just not how life works. And it's just always really been about, well, the coach that makes the state team or the coach that the coach that's going to coach the state team or whatever, they're going to pick players they've previously coached. They're not going to actually look at all the best players and pull them up. So there's little things like that I think need to be corrected in the system for it to sort of end up flourishing. But, you know, I could bore you and be like, well, there's salary caps as well, like you mentioned, and like, you know, there's not enough money in Australia, and that means we can't get the best players, which means no one's watching the game, which means it's sort of dead, which means everyone's sort of looking towards Europe, right? And, you know, it's funny me complaining about these things, but today the service I provide to players is, well, I have the contacts and I've done all this like due diligence, so like it's almost a bit of like the same thing, but it's just more, I don't know, I like to see myself as a bit of like a Robin Hood, like trying to help the amateur players, like at least have an outlet, you know, and not feel so alone.
That's funny you say that in terms of, you know, the coaches pick the teams, because growing up, you know, playing baseball, and there was a point that I was, you know, playing, you know, high level competition, and, you know, you go and try out for a state team or, you know, a representative team, and it's a funny sort of domino effect where you sort of see the same pattern of every single year it's almost like the same team, even though you go through 6 weeks of trials or whatever. So I can definitely understand that, and I can relate to that massively, because, and even like I'd play a really good game or, you know, trial out really well, but it's almost like I had this thing and I was like, they're just not going to pick me because, yeah, like you said, the politics, and it's so real, and like it definitely needs to. That I think that in Australian sport, especially in things what are, you know, like football, like baseball, like things what aren't as on the top end scale of whether it be AFL, cricket, rugby league, especially in this country. And so when you said to me, you probably didn't do as much as what you could have. Do you think the gap between you could have done a little bit more and making it could have come into fruition, or do you think?
Look, I never want to be. I'm sure we're all like, we have like those older men in our life that go, I could have gone pro, but I had my hammy injury, or, you know,
typical, eh?
Yeah, there's plenty of people that sort of hold that as their like belief.
Yeah.
And I'll be very like raw, man. Like I wasn't good enough. Like that's just how it is.
Yeah.
But that being said, I've also seen players that were worse than me hit the top level of sport. And so it's one of those things where you go, like, what's fair or what's real at the end of the day. And so, you know, hate the player, don't hate the game. Like, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. And for me, it's more like I understood how the game was played at a later age. And what I mean by that is I mean the business side of the game, because a lot of players are focusing on the football, but they're not actually understanding that without that contact, without someone opening that door for you, like it doesn't matter how good you are at the end of the day, it's not going to happen, because there's millions of kids that are way better, and you being slightly better today, like focusing on training, isn't actually what most people need. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's
just a very tough pill to swallow. Yes. And like it's a very... I love being transparent, but it's a very hard thing for people to accept, I think.
Yeah, Definitely can relate. You know, I threw the towel in for baseball probably like 15, 16. A part of it was I was getting involved in partying, but also another part of it was I just wasn't good enough to reach the top game. Could I have made it to college in the States? Probably, if I tried. But at the end of the day, it just didn't come to fruition, and maybe I just wasn't good enough. And the tough pill to swallow for that is definitely real and raw, and yeah, being transparent. Yeah, it fucking sucks. But hey, do you think, you said you're a bit of a late bloomer? How come you didn't start your career until 15? Was there people in your life who were trying to push you towards it at an early age, or was it just wasn't on your radar at all?
Yeah, look, I think it's just hindsight, right?
Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful thing, eh?
Yeah. If I had the drive that I have today, working on this business and doing everything I do back then, at 8 years old, would have been great, right? Mm-hmm. But you just don't, and so. And I see it with a lot of players as well. It's like the same sort of boat where you think you're doing enough, like you think that you're working to your 100, but really you're just doing like 60 because you don't actually understand what your 100 is.
Yeah.
Because you're just too young. And I'm sure that, I'm 25 now. I'm sure when I get to 35, I'm going to look back at this time and be like, oh, I thought I was killing it, but I was barely doing anything.
Yeah. And
I hope that happens, right? But coming back to your question. I don't know. I think I was very short, and I guess I was very small for the system in Australia, and so I didn't really fit in the system. Bigger players, stronger players just get picked here over more technical, fast players.
Yes.
So that could have been part of the reason. I think my dad pushed maybe too hard. On the early years. Do
you think he pushed too hard to the point where you resented it and you pushed back? So it's sort of like this, ultramagnetic, sort of force sort of thing?
Yeah, I think so. I definitely had bad experiences. Like, I probably played like a quarter of a season in under 8s,
Mm-hmm.
And then I went like, nah, not for me. Mm-hmm. Like, hate this. Get me to my Xbox kind of thing. Yeah. And I was just pretty much like a serial gamer and... always loved making content as well. So from the ages of like 10 to like 15, I was pretty much just doing that. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I think really it wasn't until I got a bit older and I went, oh, what am I going to do with my life? And then I just went, oh, what's the coolest thing to do? And I just felt like being an athlete is probably pretty high up there.
Yeah, it's I saw a thing on your Instagram how you were taking advantage of another academy at a young age. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I guess that would have been the start of my journey in the sort of trying to transition to pro. So when I was 17, 18, being a bit annoyed about the system here in Australia that we talked about, even though I was playing NPL.
What's NPL for the audience?
NPL is like the highest league you can play in Australia for youth.
Right, gotcha.
Right. Actually, I was playing with your videographer.
With Jimmy.
You with Jimmy. And
the elites.
The elites, yeah. And so it just, like I said, annoyed at the system. I went, hey, Dad, like most kids go, like the first thing you do is like talk to the people around you, like friends of friends, like anyone that's been overseas, whatever, whatever. And even though Dad had heaps of contacts, he was out of the game for years, And so reaching back out to people, we got in contact with someone overseas and it was an academy, but they sort of, it's easy to play with people's dreams and like throw a rug over your head and you think, oh, well, because they're in Spain, like, and they say that they can do this, like they probably can, like what are my other options, And it's either you stay where you are, where nothing's going to happen, or you just take a punt, right? Mm-hmm. And look, went overseas and obviously it was all a lie and a scam and it took me a while to figure that out and I'm glad I did because I think a lot of people never even realise it. A lot of people get scammed and they don't even realise they were just scammed. And so I've got, countless really bad stories that happened to me during that time. But it's, I guess it's something that happens to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about some of those stories.
So, look, I think from little things like it being like a military camp, like, this grown man sort of like, he'd knock on the door and we'd have 1 minute to like be dressed, go into like the kitchen, have some milk and cookies, and like be outside walking to training. And if we didn't get out there in a minute, he'd be like, come out and start like literally pushing you out.
That's fucked.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. And then, little things like bunk beds in rooms, like a room pretty small like this, but there'd be like 5 people sleeping here. You'd have 2 bunk beds and someone would sleep in the middle.
Far out.
And so that was like the coexistence. And then on top of that, other things like, we'd all be wearing our sort of football gear or like excited, getting to training, and the training would be like a dirt pitch. The train, even going like traveling from the train and especially taking the train back at like 10 at night, people would start fight with us because we'd look very preppy, all wearing the same football gear, and we're obviously foreigners,
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of incidents, and I was staying with like, Brazilians, Uruguayans. I was born in Argentina, so that doesn't help either.
Yeah.
And so, we're all pretty hot-headed boys back then, and
Yeah,
so
for sure, full of testosterone.
yeah, and so stuff would happen all the time there, and even little things like you're 17 and we're not allowed to shower in the residency, so we had to shower after the trainings on like the grounds that they had, and the shower would literally be like a prison shower. Like it'd literally be like no doors, no nothing, like just full. Like team showers, right? But just no barriers, like prison. And so you're showering there with like grown men and like in the nude, and just even that's uncomfortable to like, have to do that. Like you take that for granted, like living at home and being like, I get my like nice warm shower. Like to add to that, there was no warm shower. Like it was always cold because there was teams before us that would use it all up. Yeah. So by the time we had it, it was freezing cold, like on top of that. So just little things like that where you do enough of those things over and over again, and it just like conditions you to be like a bit of an animal.
Yeah.
And so a lot of kids didn't hack it. Like a lot of kids would just kids would cry to sleep. Like we were sharing a room, and like I can hear like 2 people a night at least like sobbing.
That's horrible, man.
And so it doesn't sound like, to me today, it doesn't sound that bad. Like there's a lot of stuff I think I've repressed, a lot of stuff that happened. Like I saw a lot of stuff that happened to like other guys that I guess didn't have enough charisma. Because on top of that, like you're also fighting for your dream, and you think that you've convinced yourself, and this like grown man or whatever on the other side has convinced you that this is like what you need to
go through to achieve that success. Yeah. Hey.
And it's just bullshit, like no one has to go through that.
No.
And
like a slave camp labor.
Yeah, literally. Kids we'd fight amongst each other, and like kids would be like breaking each other's legs in training, and like not legs, but like, for example, like an elbow to the face, bloody noses, like broken noses, like things like that. And then afterwards, like, oh, like pretend it's all good, just to fight for a position on this stupid team that's just an academy.
Yeah.
And it didn't even mean anything, but you just thought that you needed to make this team because that was your next step. And so stuff like that, like we were training 8 hours a day. Like no professional team is going to make you train that much. Like this dude just didn't want us in the house. Like he was, we were forced to train 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours at night. And like I could barely like walk after like 4 weeks. It's like too much, So look, the list goes on.
Yeah.
But it's something that I guess I try not to forget, because as much as I'm someone that really pushes stuff down and really just forgets about it, because I think the only thing that matters is like what's in front of you, what you can do today, and just move forward. And so I try not to even like think about this stuff, but there's a lot that I think I want to hold on to a little bit, that feeling, as much as I'm forgetting it, because I don't want that to happen to another player. And I know it's still happening, and I know there's other academies potentially not as bad, but it's still bad, it's still wrong.
What was your duration from like the transition from pro until the end of that academy where you had all those horrible experiences?
So that academy, like funny enough, I did like 3 months there, came back.
You're an animal.
And then went back again to the same academy because
Was that in hopes that you were going to reach that next tier?
yeah, because I mean, like, I think the first time I didn't, like, I was still young, like, and I had no knowledge of the game, and, like, as much as people think they understand the game, you don't. Like, your coaches here and people that even have said that they've coached somewhere else, like, they don't fully understand how the game actually is. And being a kid, you don't see, like, all this stuff. To me was like, well, that's what I have to go through, you know? And so I was like, I'll go through that, you know? Like, I can, you know, it's worth it. And so, yeah, came back.
Sounds like a boot camp for the military or something, man, rather than trying to get to the top game of football, hey?
It definitely felt like that, dude. Like, there's definitely, like, little stories that I think, because I still hang out, I still talk to some guys that I sort of went through that with. And we remember sometimes, like, our happiness, like, as crazy as it sounds now to say, like, from trainings, we would go and we'd get, like, we'd go to, like, the shop. And in Spain, you call it, like, it's very racist. You call them, like, el chino. And el chino just means the Chinese guy. It's super racist, but that's just the culture there.
Yes.
And so we'd go to the corner store and we'd buy, like, a loaf of bread, like a warm baguette, and a, like, 1 litre bottle of Fanta, and we'd share it between, like, the 5 dudes on the way to the train. And to me, like, as crazy as that sounds, like, it's so hard to, like, even picture you finding, like, the slightest bit of enjoyment out of sharing bread and, like, a Fanta. But we're all broke. We're all, like, we're going through the same stuff, and just sharing bread and, like, the same bottle, like, everyone just sipping out the same bottle or whatever, was, like, the highlight of my days. Like, little things like that I try not to forget that, because now, like, you know, going and living the high lives of, like, you know, Dubai and, like, Spain and how people treat me today, it's just, like, completely different. So I try not to take things like that for granted. I just went on remember what was your question?
No, that was good. Yeah, so with that, I can, you know, coming back to, like, outside of the football stuff, I think having those moments with your boys, that they mean so much. Right, in hindsight, in the moment they might not be, like, the good, but, you know, all you need in life is, you know, a good group of mates, you know, no matter the circumstance, no matter where you're, you know, in Spain broke, whether you're getting, you know, picked on for fights, to go to training or, you know, wherever you may be. I think the catalyst of having, you know, solid people around you does form such a strong foundation. So I can appreciate that response, and I can really understand, you know, resonate with that too, because some of the best times I've had, I've been broke, just in a room with, like, my closest best mates, right? And yeah, you know, you don't really take it, you take it for granted at the moment, but, you know, as I look back onto some of my past experiences too, in that instances, yeah, it's like, those are some of the best times we've had, whether it be growing up as a child or coming into our adolescence, whatever it may be. You know, having a strong form of foundation around you is so important, right? And, you know, you were telling me before about how your dad was pushing you for football. Talk to me about his story and his, you know, his coming into the football scene at a young age.
Yeah, so Dad was a bit of a gun. He's always been a gun in football. Definitely much better than me. You know, like, he even represented Australia as well at some time. Their youth, like, their under-21s. Yep. Yonks ago, he's a bit of a dinosaur.
Yeah, so, nice, eh?
But
still riding through the jungle, eh?
Yeah. So, look, his story with football was pretty, you know, I guess, like a lot of old men, he'll probably tell you the same thing about, you know, he could have made it if he went to these trials or whatever, met my mum and had my sister and me and whatever, and so that was the end of his dream. But, yeah, like, my dad's stories are crazy. Like, I've learnt so much from him. He's definitely been, like, the best mentor to have, especially when, you know, we sort of founded this, because he initially founded Elite Football, and it was an academy. Like, he started a sort of academy, and then when I came back, I sort of went, hey, like, there's this gap in the market, like, no one's helping amateur players, and so started working with him. And I think without him, I wouldn't have been able to do not even half the stuff I've been able to do, just because who's going to take, like, a 20-year-old seriously? Yeah. Right?
Not a lot.
And so having that older guy, and, like, he's, you know, so much business experience, you know. We've never had money, like, you know, we've never had a lot of money. Yeah. But I don't think that's always been his fault, I guess. So he's been very unlucky. But knowledge wise, like he's filled with like how to take conversations, how to liaise, how to like, and so super invaluable piece of the company. And it's just like, I think now that I'm older, I realise that, without him, having him as like, because I even get on calls sometimes with people and they'll be like, oh, so how have you done all, like everything you've done, and they get really confused. Like they can't like accept it, I think, especially parents. And then I'll say, oh, well, it's not just me, it's like me and the team, and I'll name dad or whatever. Like, oh, and they'll be like, oh, that's right, you got your dad. Oh, it makes sense, And so like, it's easier for people to accept that, I guess.
Yeah.
And so, it's something that I've had to like deal with a lot, but I think without him, it would have taken me 15 years,
What are some of the biggest things that you've learned from your father? Whether it be business, athleticism, life, anything.
So I guess the biggest thing that I've taken from him is charisma.
Yeah.
So my biggest lesson has been charisma from him. I think as a kid and for a lot of my life, and it took me a really long time to learn this, and I'm really embarrassed about it, but I just wasn't the nicest person. I wasn't likable, I was super arrogant, super ego, like even as like I always, like I still do, but I managed it a lot better now.
Yeah.
And so, he really instilled that, like, hey, like if people don't like you, they're not going to do anything for you.
Yeah. And
you're not going to get very far. It took me a really long time to learn that, but I think it's just invaluable. I don't think people understand just how much being a good person and just having like a bit of charisma about you, where like people want to hang out with you. Like even if you're a player and you're like trying to make a team, I guarantee you, like you can be good. You can be a good player, but if you're someone that the coaches want around because you're just a laugh and you're just like the best bloke, they're gonna then fight for you behind the scenes because they're gonna be like, I don't want Lockie to just go back to Australia because I want him to be around me. Yeah. And I think that with business, the same thing. Like when I hire people today, like
personality hires, hey?
Bro,
yeah,
like
for sure.
100%. Like I don't want to just have some dude that's really good at his job.
But a robot.
Mm-hmm. Like that's so, like I've got my business is my life at the end of the day. So I've got to actually, talk to this dude all the time. And I think it's the same thing with everything. And that's probably the biggest thing.
Yeah, awesome, mate. And sort of coming into, we've covered a lot of ground already, which is fucking awesome. Coming from your transition from amateur to pro, while trying to make pro, to coming back, what was the steps you wanted to take to join elite football with your dad once you come back to Australia? How was the conversation around that, and what was your input into the business?
Yeah, awesome. So I'll go back because you asked that a little bit later and I messed it up. I went on a
You're
tangent.
good, man. No, let's go.
So, went to the academy, came back, and then, Dad lost his job at the time, which was pretty hard for us for about a year. So, I didn't have any more money. Like, he already invested a lot of money in me going over, and I remember having that conversation. I remember it was the first time I ever cried in front of my dad.
Wow.
When I was like, oh, so that means I'm not going to be able to get back over, kind of thing. And I remember that feeling, and I was just kind of, like, sobbing in the car. And the first time ever, and I think it was probably the only time actually. And he just like did the impossible, him and Mum, to sort of get me back over, which I'll like forever be
that's beautiful,
grateful for.
Yeah.
And went back over, went to the same academy, because I was still
3-round trip, hey?
Yeah, I was still young and I didn't, it didn't really, click with me just yet. But when again, this time it only lasted a month. And I went and I realised it. I started to really be hyper aware of like, everything that was going on around me. And I just bounced. The dude actually just came to mind, another crazy story.
Hit me.
I had a go at him. Like I was the only person to actually stand up and just be like, this is wrong. And in front of everyone, like I took my moment, I guess, after a training session when he was sort of like talking to everyone, and I just like called him the biggest scammer, like you play with like kids' dreams. Like I just took it all off my chest. Like I just said it all. And his response was like, to one of the other coaches that was like co-running the residency or whatever, he's like, make sure you take his passport. like we don't fuck around here. Like make sure that, like he tried to like scare me that I wasn't going to be able to leave. I swear. And so like me there, like I was still in like 18. So very young. I thought I was a man, but like still very, very young. And yeah, he like, I was scared that it was, damn, like he's gonna take my passport, like I'm gonna get like, you know, back home or whatever. And so I like rushed. I like, you know, ran to the train to get back home to go to my room to grab my passport, right? And actually one of the coaches, Diego, shout out to Diego, he came in and he said like, oh, Alan, don't worry, I know he asked me to do that, but I'm not going to do that. And he like very kindly like, you know, took me to the airport the next morning, which I appreciate. And well, from then I went to Portugal, and I just sort of went back and forth between Portugal and Spain for a bit and just tried to make my own connections, tried to knock on doors, and that was rough in of itself to just try and do it like yourself. But I guess I went around for about a year, and it was very rough. And I realised, I'm going to answer your question, don't worry.
No, you're right, brother.
And I realised just how tough it is as an amateur player, and just how much of a number you are, and just how much like no one cares. And like English is my second language, so I can speak Spanish fluently, and still like I understood everything they were saying, and like exactly like what was, you know, pros and cons, whatever. But still no one cared, right? And so there were boys at the time in different clubs that I was trialing at that were taken seriously, that were like nice to me and that I could sort of build a relationship with. And the one thing they all had in common is that they all had an agent, right? They all had someone else that wasn't from the club looking after them behind the scenes. And they, you know, gave me different agent numbers, and I reached out to them, and the common denominator is that no one wanted to work with an amateur player, you know, because it's like gambling. At the end of the day, amateur players is like gambling, right? So until I got like that first contract, whether it be very low, they didn't want to take anyone on board, right? So I realized, like, okay, there's people out there that help, but they don't help me, you know? And so when I came back, and for a lot of reasons, I did get offered like very low division clubs, but man, like the lifestyle in Europe and how things are, like you can't compare it to Australia. And so even though you think it's cool, like you're playing at like a low division, like you're living like a brokey, like you're living like very, very low. And I just went like, I think I was 20, and I just went like, it's not for me, I guess. Like it's not quite the life that I'm willing to put out. And I realized I was more interested in like the fame and the money that the football world would bring than the actual football. And so I was just honest with myself. I said like, no, not for me. So when I came back, I just went to Dad and like, look, these are the few contacts I made. You know, you're older. You reach out to them. You know, they're going to listen to you a bit more. And I just sort of expressed like, look, there's people that can do this properly, and we could do this properly. Like it'll take time, but like we could actually help amateur players. Like we could actually, you know, be like the right pathway for them. Like all these people are doing things the wrong way because it's easier to do that. But there is like, you know, potential there to actually grow something that's, you know, good. And so, yeah, gave a few contacts to Dad, and like, I'm definitely making this very light, but, you know, you start slow and you just keep moving forward, being consistent, and that's sort of what I guess I brought to elite football at the very start.
Yeah, I feel like with amateur players, you know, you obviously experienced it, and I have too, and it's like you feel like you're in a bit of a cage. You're in a cage with a concrete roof on top of your head where you can't get up above it. So in terms of you and coming back to elite football, what are some of the steps you take to take the roof off that cage for amateur players and to guide them into the direction of professional?
Yeah, so look, I want to be honest, definitely at the start I messed up a lot, you know, like...
Such as life, brother?
Yeah, for sure. There's definitely a few players that unfortunately had bad experiences with me at the very, very start. And, you know, my first ever event, there's probably like 9 people there, you know, crazy, bad stuff happened, you know, and you got to start somewhere, I guess. But today, you know, I think it's easy today to look at what we do and be like, well, it looks easy. It looks like you got all the contacts and everything's just handed. But I guess it's more about, I think I understand what a player actually needs, what an amateur player is actually looking for. And it's just more about just providing that. Like, my job isn't actually that hard. It's really hard to get where I'm at. But then now it's actually quite easy because it's just a few messages, you know? But it's just like, it's the journey that to get there, to build those relationships. That's the hard part. So in terms of what we provide, like, you know, we cater completely to amateur players right now. Everything. I don't want to be sales pitch in terms of like exactly what we do, but it's just direct access. Like, that's like one of the easiest things that people aren't doing. Like, when we take someone, they're going to trial with the professional club. Like, it's not going to be some academy that potentially they'll do a late. No, you'll go directly there. And so while they're there, it's just, they don't have to nag anyone about if they're going up or not. Like, me and my team do that, and we'll tell them exactly. And we'll force the clubs to do certain things to my players. So, like, my players will go there, and this isn't fair, by the way, but they'll tell me, oh, like, I get treated way better than some other boys here. And I'll be like, look, unfortunately, such is life. Like, you're with elite football. They're not. I can't help everyone, kind of thing, unfortunately. And so it's just about that. It's just playing the game, I guess.
Yeah. In terms of that, hey, like you said, you had a bit of some rocky starts. I feel like, you know, rocky terrain leads you to beautiful destinations, right?
100%.
So, and in terms of that, what are some of the sacrifices that you have had to make from, you know, coming back to Australia to moving up in the ranks within your business? What's probably the biggest sacrifice you've had to make to be able to, you know, come to that beautiful destination?
Good question. Yeah, look, mess-ups and failures that we've had, definitely more than the successes.
It's the most beautiful part though sometimes, hey, when you look back in hindsight, you know, makes you realise, you know, sort of how far you have come.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, look, like even that first, like today we have events and it's, you know, more than 50 people each event. Like, we go all over Australia. And it's great. Like, they sell out pretty quickly. And, you know, boys from those events, like the last events we did, 4 of them got signed to professional clubs. So not only are the events success, but on top of that, we also get players across the line, you know? And so it's awesome. But very first event where we did, 9 people attended. It was during COVID as well. And so...
I mean, I think that's a win in itself. 9 people at it because we were all locked down to the bloody bare bones, you know?
It was the second week of COVID. And so it was coming out and people dropped off. Yeah. But people were very scared. Like, it was I think the fear factor was like at an all-time high because the borders were starting to get closed. And even just rain. Like, it was a 4-day event. It ended up being 2 because rain cancelled it for 2. Right. So, like, Dad and I, it was on the Gold Coast, actually. Dad and I, the day of the event, because it was raining, we went to 13 different clubs on the Gold Coast to ask them if we could host, if they have like any field that we can use to replace the field that we initially like had. Because we're going to have to fully cancel the event and refund everyone. And like, we were going to be down like 20 grand. Like, it was a lot of money because, you know, we bring people overseas and didn't really have much margin. And yeah, I won't forget, like, shout out to Southport. Like, they came through and they're like, yeah, you can use it for at least 2 days. So that's awesome that they helped. But like, I got shut down by 13 local clubs on the Gold Coast. And today, like, these clubs would all
assistance.
Yeah. And today, like, the same clubs would all like want to work with us, you know, but like not when I needed it.
No.
You know, only when I could provide something. So that's why shout out to Southport. They, you know, saved that. But yeah, it's just, I think the biggest thing I had to do was just go all in, you know. I think I was doing a lot of different things. I had different businesses. Elite Four was one of them. And it wasn't until, like, had a bit of, like, a spiritual awakening, a little bit of a, like, you know, conversation with God and just be like, hey, like, I'm spread thin as what's right for me. And at the time, I think I broke up with my girlfriend. And there was a lot of things that just were going wrong in my life because of the decisions I was making. And I think, yeah, the lesson of just going all in on one thing is probably the best thing that you can do. For anyone watching, it's like, life's so short. Like, why are you, you know, trying to do everything? Like, don't do 2 or 3 things. Just pick one thing. Just go all out in it. If it doesn't work out, pick something else and just go all out in it. Like, just keep moving like that, because you're going to be like a much happier person, and things are going to like grow 10 times faster.
Talk to me about that spiritual awakening. How did that come about? What inspired that?
So, look, I've never like, I've never done any like substance abuse or anything like that. I never touched anything. For me, it was more, look, I think I was a bit money hungry at the start. I think I was sort of chasing the dosh, and trying to figure out what was going to make me the most money. And so at the time I had a YouTube business, and I had this, let's call it marketing business, and elite football, right? And look, actually my YouTube business was doing really well. I was doing it with Connor, my best mate, and we're making like probably like 100,000 a year just from the YouTube. So like 50,000 each. Like we were living like, it's pretty good.
Healthy, man. Yeah,
it's healthy from like, and then I was making a bit of money from like the marketing stuff, and I was actually making nothing from elite football, like zero. We were actually negative. Like every time we did an event, like we'd break even or just go under, and bless Dad, he'd cough up some money to keep it afloat. And so I wanted to, I felt like everything was growing, but it was just growing super slow, not to where I wanted it to be, right?
Baby steps, hey?
Exactly. And so it came at a time where it felt like the universe was telling me, like, you're making the wrong decisions, like I lost my partner, which, was amazing. She's amazing. And so that was obviously wrong. And she just had her morals and values just better aligned than me at the time, which is totally fair. I would have broken up with me as well. And things were just going wrong, like the marketing business was just affecting other relationships, with friends and whatever, because I brought in like a group of four of my mates to do that, and that was just affecting like everything. And then, certain stuff started happening with like my YouTube business as well. And it just felt like everything was like growing, but everything was growing like very unhealthy. And I just like asked, man, I just sat down. I just went what do I have to do? Like what do I pick? Okay, I want to go all in. And I think at the time I was watching like an Alex Hormozi video popped up. I love that guy.
The best ever, man.
Yeah.
Shout out to Alex.
And he said something about like going all in on something. It just came, and I was just like, that's how I feel. Like I'm, exactly how I feel. And I just asked. I was like, what do I pick? Because I loved the three of them, and they all had potential. And I feel like, regardless of the decision that I would have made, I think any of them could have grown. I don't think that just because I picked elite football, that it grew. I think any of them could have happened. But I just went like, what do I actually want to do? Like, what do I want to be remembered by? Or like, what's going to feel, like, what's the hardest thing, I guess? That's sort of the question I was like, what's the hardest choice for me to make? Because usually that's the right choice. And it was the football business that was making no money. I don't know why. I ended up, just sort of leaving both the YouTube business and then the marketing one, and went all in, and like, dude, for like 2 years there, like that was rough. Like, no money, like nothing looked like we were going to come out of like the hole that we were in, because with the football industry, like the easiest way to make money is, I know you're not like that aware of it, but it's either you pull a rug over people's heads, and sell a dream that isn't real, or you go and you train little kids. Like when you have no football knowledge, when you have like no contacts, no nothing, like the easiest thing is like to just start up an academy.
Start from the bottom, and
train little kids or like whatever. And I didn't want to do any of those two things. So doing it the right way, it's like 10 times harder. And so, look, best decision I ever made was going all in, because now it's just like, man, your head just feels so much clearer as well. Like you're just so aligned with everything, and there's just so many different ways you can, move the one thing.
Coming back to when you said your partner split up with you, do you think it took that moment for you to realise what your surroundings were? And from that moment, from losing someone who you love dearly, do you think that is what, sort of started the snowball effect to, you had this spiritual awakening, you had this decision to make between 3 businesses. Do you think they all come into effect into the lead up of choosing the elite football?
Yeah. Look, I think at the end of the day, we all see what we want to see when we're ready to see it. And I think, like, my partner, she was always very, like, religious, very, like, push, like, the God. And I would never push that on anyone. Like, I was very against it for my entire life, practically. And I think until it hits you, like, you can't really, talk about it. And so I was just sort of always pushing back on that because the things I wanted at the time didn't align with what, with what her values and what she was sort of believing in. And so, yeah, I think there comes a point, man, when, like, unfortunately, until it happens to you, so until, like, you realize, like, you get a bit of money or you get a bit of that thing that you thought was gonna, like, you thought you wanted, and to me it was happening with those businesses, like, as silly as it sounds, like, we only had, like, 15,000 subscribers on the YouTube or whatever, but, like, I had 2 people approach me and be like, oh, I saw your videos. And so, like, I got a taste of that, like, earlier on, and I got a taste of, like, the money side of things with the other businesses. And until you realize that, like, there's just no happiness in that. Like, there's actually you're actually not going to care.
There's just no substance whatsoever.
Nothing. It doesn't really hit you. So I think it was a bit of that and a bit of, like, just the universe was clearly showing me. Like, I was deciding not to look at the signs. Like, I was deciding not to be like, clearly things are crumbling. So, yeah, it's just a bit about me, like, accepting that and being honest with myself and being like, hey, what do you actually want? Like, do you actually want to be this, like, Andrew Tate type figure that walks around like he's, all that? Or is it something else? And I just felt like I had to sort of crush my ego. Like, I had to it was really, like, tough to have that conversation, be like, okay, none of this stuff validates me, and I just need to do what I think is the hardest road, but what I actually think is actually going to serve people, And at the end of the day, like, look, even, like, the littlest things, like, the only reason I get out of bed in the morning sometimes is because I know that I've got to take my dog for a walk, And so it's like having that, your focus being on serving other people is always going to make you do, like, stuff. Because if it's all about you, I guarantee you, like, that business is not going to, like, flourish. Like, you're not going to make money. You're not going to want to work on it because I don't think as humans we care about it, like, ourselves that much, right? But if you're focusing on, like me thinking, like, if I don't send these messages out, if I don't do this, like, these kids are going to go through the same thing. It's like that is a way easier thing for me to just work 12 hours a day.
Yeah. What do you think the biggest thing you've learnt from coming from those rough 2 years to where you are now in terms of, like, your whole aura as a person, going through the breakup and you guys obviously back together, which is super awesome to hear, man. Super stoked for you. Yeah. What's been probably, like, the soul, like, the biggest thing you've noticed within yourself and what's had a butterfly effect around to the people's around you?
Yeah, good question. Hard to answer that question. Look, I think at some point we all have to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like,
what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, we all, as much as, we all want status, we all want to feel like we matter, At the end of the day, like, nothing really matters. You know what I mean? Like, none of us really matter. I guess that's how I sort of, like, look at it. I think we're all, everyone really kind of wants the same things, and at the end of the day, like, no one's really going to remember you for anything. So I think I had to have a really big ego check again. Like, I had to really go, hey, doesn't matter if I'm, like, the most famous person in the world or, like, help the most people build the biggest elite football agency. Like, it's not just Australia, it's, like, globally or, like, whatever, making all the money in the world, blah, blah, blah. None of it matters. Like, the Queen died and she was a monarch for I don't know how long, and you don't think about her at all.
No.
Okay, so why would anyone think about me, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was, like, a big check. And then...
That's super valuable, though, It's like Yeah, I was listening to Chris Williamson the other day. Shout out to Chris.
Yeah, awesome guy.
You know, he said in 3 generations, no one's going to know you. No one's going to know you who you are. You, even some of your family members won't even know who you are. You know, lay down the generations. So stop taking everything so seriously.
Yep.
You know, oh, something happened to you on your way to work. Oh, fuck. Oh, I spilled coffee on my jeans. Fuck.
Yep.
I'll just go inside and put a new pair of jeans on. You know what I mean? It's like the little things we think matter are so minuscule, because at the end of the day, we're only a bag of meat spinning on a fucking rock in the middle of butt fuck nowhere.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So I think, yeah, coming from that ego check, because I know I've had to do it to myself. I think majority of us males have, especially coming into a space where we want to help and guide people and direct into a more positive way of life, a more, you know, steer direction, you know, getting away from a negative lifestyle, whether it be toxic, substance, alcohol, whatever it is. We all have to have that tough conversation with us, whether it be at 18, whether it be at 30, even 35, 40. You know, our life starts when we truly start to live it for our own selves.
100%.
Not for someone else. Because I know I've done it, and I'm possibly you have done it too, whether it be for your father, whether it be, you know, for the academy who you know was scamming you, but you just wanted to keep on riding that wave. So I think having those conversations with ourselves means so much.
Yep. And
once you can have those conversations with yourself and realise what you're doing wrong, how you can change, that's when you really start to live your own life. And so I think coming from your ego check, how did you start to move differently as a person and to those around you?
Yeah, completely agree with everything you just said, by the way. It just, like you said, it hits you. You make that mental check, and then, you know, for me, it was like, well, what do I actually value? You know, what do I actually just want to focus on? And like, there's a lot of variables and things that come into play. Like, you know, part of what you just said then, like for me was like, when I came back that second time, Mum was like, okay, well now you have to go to uni. You promised me you'd go to uni if it doesn't work out. Yeah. And so, which is fair, like love my mum, and that's her reality, right? At least it was for a long time. I think I've convinced her now that life's a bit different. Mm-hmm. But, you know, you're feeling the pressure and going to uni, and realising this is not for me, like, this is not the life I want to live. I remember I was at uni and I was like, it was like business something that I was studying, and people would be like, oh, it's like, what are you doing? I was like, oh yes, I've got like elite football and this, and like had like 10,000 followers in elite football, and had started to do like a bit of stuff there, and they were just like, what are you doing here? And it didn't really hit me until I was like, yeah, fair, like I'm actually already doing like what this degree is going to get me anyways, or it's supposed to get me.
Just with a lot of debt behind it.
Yeah, exactly. And so I just felt like making that ego check and then going, you need to be selfish and you need to do exactly what you want to do every single day and just be you, like 100%. And just forget about the noise, forget about something's working out or it's not working out. So I think it goes back to like going all in. And a big part of what also changed my personality was like going over there, like even little things, like I started to appreciate dinners with my family, you know? I was like, something where I was just like, always took it for granted, or like in the mornings and like talking to my mum and dad. And so like I still live at home, you know, I don't have to, but I just feel like one day it's going to end kind of thing. Like one day I'll walk into the kitchen and they're not going to be there, or like I'll want to reach out and they're not going to be there. And so I understand like not everyone has like really healthy relationship with their parents, and I get there's like, you know, everyone's different. But to me, like even something as simple as that, of like understanding like the only people that matter really is like your family and like close friends. But friends, you know, come and go, and life's taught me that as well. Yeah. And so just being like the best person you can be, helping people as much as possible. And like as corny as it all sounds, like I think as you get older, you just realize like what else, like, you know, the money, the cars, the this, the that, like nothing really matters at the end of the day.
That rings so true. I used to live in Canada for a period of time there, and you know, I come home and just having family time, you know, just it means so much. And you know, we all have to be aware of it, you know. Yep. And you know, we take those little things for granted. Like, yeah, I'm still at home myself. You know, love it. You know, Mum and I have a great relationship. Dad and I still have a great relationship too. Awesome. You know, And yeah, it's those little things, you know, and, you know, that rings true when you say, you know, one day you're going to walk into a kitchen and they're not going to be there.
Yeah.
And if we can all come together as a, you know, as a civilized human to be like, okay, I want to spend as much time, because I think there's a bit of a stigma around being at home, especially from like 18 onwards. It's like, oh, what the, you're still at home?
Yeah, yeah.
It's like, but I think like the true feeling, people, they're like, yeah, you know, it's like, yeah, I love it. Because like you said, one day you're going to go into the kitchen, you're going to try ring the phone, it's going to go to voicemail. You know, you're going to try and invite them to your home, and they're not going to even be around to accept the invitation, you know. So I think, yeah, that rings true, and thank you for saying that, because I think that's going to reinforce a lot of things into the audience listening today.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's probably one of my biggest fears, I think. Thinking about people that are not going to be around, or like, you know, even like my dad, like I feel like, you know, a lot of the times I let my ego play and I go like, I built this shit, you know, like, and I let that like really absorb me. But just thinking about him not being around, I'm like, oh, I get that check of like, damn, like not even be able to walk in and be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or whatever, you know? And like, I think we just have to be honest with ourselves as well. Like I've had a lot of, not even just like relationship wise, but life wise, it's like, I've had a lot of friends, like that used to be serial like entrepreneurs, you know, recently like start to dip out. Like I feel like once you get to like that 25, 26, people start to, you know, get married and have kids, and everything becomes a bit more serious. Like life just all of a sudden just becomes like work, you know, life just becomes like, hey, you got to like make serious decisions. And I've had a lot of people like dip out and go, well, I'm not doing this dream that I want to do anymore. I'm going to go work for this corporate job or whatever, right? And whether they're happy or not about it, or you know, I understand everyone's situation is different. But I think that made me go like, well, what if everything like just fails, you know? Like I'm living at home, I'm investing 95% of everything we make back into the business. So like my personal wage is like very, very low, because all I want is to just keep growing the business. Like that's like the most fun that I can have, I guess. That's what I want. And I've had like a serious conversation with my partner. I was like, hey, just so you're aware, and this might be like a deal breaker for you, but if everything fails in the future, like if we were to get married, we're moving in together, and for whatever reason, whatever I'm doing at the time, whether it be elite football or anything else, like just goes under, I still want to do whatever I want to do every day, whether it's a different business, whether it's something else. Like that's just me. Like I can live with nothing, but still feel like I'm working towards whatever I want to work towards, and be happy, you know? And so if that means I'm making 20,000 a year, like working like part-time or like casually and just making enough to pay the bills, but still doing what I want to do, I know that's someone I want to be. And so if us in the future having a kid or being married is going to like, you're not going to want to live that life, you know, or you're not prepared to potentially live that life, we're not suited together. Like I need to like, and I think that was like a very raw discussion
That's
to have.
Yeah, it's hard.
But I'm looking around and I'm going like, it scares me. Like I don't want to have to go like work a 9 to 5 again or whatever. Like nothing against like all that, but I understand like I'd rather live like half broke, half on Centrelink or whatever, and just keep doing what I, you know, want to do.
100%. Do you think, you know, coming from, you know, your personal experiences, which has been awesome to share, coming into the business side of things, in your walks of life so far, have you ever felt like you've experienced imposter syndrome?
Oh, 100%. All the time. All the time.
How does that look for you?
You know what? This is really good. This is a really good question. Because I personally believe that you feel imposter syndrome up until the point that you actually believe that you are who you say you are. And so I felt it probably up until about a year ago.
Okay.
It probably wasn't, or even less. It wasn't probably until this second time I went overseas. Second time I went overseas for the business, that I started to feel like, okay, I am who I say I am. And it just went away. But for sure, like, dude, there was no reason for me to be in Dubai and shaking hands with Iniesta. I know you don't know who that guy is, but he's probably one of like the all-time best footballers. You know, like I used to play with like him on Ultimate Team, like he was in my FIFA team.
Yeah.
And like times like that, like meeting famous footballers or like getting treated like the best, like VIP, to games in like Spain or whatever, when like if I were to go to like a local club here that wouldn't even pay like 2 cents to me, you know, like it's like whatever. Maybe not now, but like 3 years ago, it's like, do you know what I mean? And having that, like, it's so weird how like some small club here might not pay you attention, you know, but you go overseas and like one of the biggest clubs, it's like,
your royalty.
Here, walk this, what can we do? What, you know, all the time. Yeah, especially with what I do. Like, I walk into 95, like every single room, and I'm the youngest by like 20 years. And so when I talk to like these people, it's like...
Does that intimidate you? Or do you think you have a strong enough self-confidence and belief within yourself that you believe that you're meant to be in that room?
I think I've always been delusional. I think it's the dumbest thing to have, but also the best thing to have. Because I think I've always just way overvalued myself.
Yeah.
Even like looking back onto like a few years ago when I did it, I think the older you get, the more conservative you are of things, and the more you understand like who you are and whatnot. But I think the best thing that helped me in the early days is just being like delusional. Like I felt like, like I deserved it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But sometimes you have to be delusional.
100%.
You know, you have to be to the point where you think you deserve it, where even though you don't, you know, it's like even if you think you're going to make it and you're not, I think it's that core belief. It's so strong, right? And, you know, coming into, like even there was a period of time where when I was, through my baseball career, I was like, I'm going to be the best fucking baseball player in the world. I'd convinced myself. Yeah. I had fully convinced it was like, it didn't like ring past anything in my mind. Even, you know, before I had I got a triathlete anyway, going through your triathlon, I was like, I'm going to be the best triathlete in the world. You know, some things happen, you get injured and stuff, and you're just like, but then you sort of got to swallow the pill. Like going back to the swallow the pill sort of thing. It's like, okay, maybe I won't be, and that's totally fine. But like channel that elsewhere into something you love, which is like what I'm doing now. You know, like channeling into the podcast. Like I truly believe this is going to be fucking one of the best globally.
Me too.
Maybe I'm delusional. I don't know, but I think delusion is the best way to be. You know what I mean? So, and like in terms of the imposter syndrome thing, I like my first 3 episodes. I sat in this chair. I was just like having like nervous sweats. Like the first 20 minutes, I was like, it was hot and heavy. I was red. I was like face was swelling up. But it's like, when you start to believe that, you are who you say you are, and you believe that you're in the space where you're meant to be, and the things you do, like having people reach out to me like you, and this is a fucking awesome episode already. You know what I mean? So like, once you start putting out those healthy vibrations and the healthy frequencies, everything flows. Yep. And so I think the imposter syndrome, I think I'll definitely experience it a lot more in my life, and maybe you will too. But that's part of the delusion, and I think that's where a lot of the growth does truly happen.
100%. There's definitely I think there's a quote that really helped me with it as well.
Hit me. I love a quote.
I'm gonna, you know what? I'll pull it up because it's a long quote, and I'll definitely butcher it because for me it's the start and the end are like perfect. Yeah. But it came. Well, I'll say it and then I'll explain it.
Yeah, no worries.
So it's Terence McKenna. I don't know if you're familiar with his work, but it goes, nature loves courage. You make the commitment and nature will respond to that commitment by removing impossible obstacles. Dream the impossible dream and the world will not grind you under. It will lift you up. This is the trick. This is what all these teachers and philosophers who really counted, who really touched the alchemical gold, this is what they understood. This is a shamanic dance in the waterfall. This is how magic is done. By hurling yourself into the abyss and discovering it's a featherbed. To me, like that start, like nature loves courage, and hurl yourself into the abyss, and you'll discover it's just a featherbed. Like it came to me at a time when I was doing my first sort of business trip in Spain, and I had never gone to all these professional clubs. It's always been like talks through text and whatever, or like emails. And we'd only lined up, and I invested every single cent the business had. Like we actually went negative like just under $1,000. And it was me, because I paid for a videographer as well to come with me, and no one had ever like done like the content that we do, and we'd only actually lined up like 2 clubs or like 3 clubs, and it was like a 5-week trip, like 4-week trip. No, sorry, 3-week trip. And I had no idea how to like, you know, approach these people, how to talk, like, what to say. Like, you know, you start to get in your head about
you
like
do, you overthink it so much.
Thing.
Yeah.
And I just remember that like I asked the universe for it. Like right before I got on the plane, I was like, I was the most sweats, like the most stressed that I had ever been. Like I was so stressed on that flight over to Madrid that I threw up the entire flight.
Really?
Like blood and everything. Like I was just like overthinking like to another level. And that video came to me as soon as I landed in like Dubai, like halfway through. And it just made sense. It's just like you can't actually control anything. And if you're just consistent and you just put yourself out there, you just show up and you just do it, like things will work out. And I remember like the day we landed, we were already like with a new club and we're already filming. And in the 3 weeks, we ended up doing 13 clubs in 3 weeks.
Awesome.
Like every 2 days, like Ben and I were like just moving to a different joint. And so it's just like, you just got to do it, you know?
Nature loves courage. I have courage written on the front of my leg.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't notice that.
That's, yeah. I think,
awesome.
You know, channeling courage can be some of the most, you know, strongest attribute someone can have in their own life. So apart from emotional regulation, I think for me, you know, being courageous, doing things you don't want to do, but going to do it anyway. Like, you know, you stepping off that plane back into Australia and stepping into the business, like that's courageous. You stepping into Madrid, that's courageous as fuck. You know what I mean? So like even like when the ships are stacked up against you, you know, and you still push past it, I think that is such a strong, even like internally, you know, there's this quote I heard and it goes, as the tide rises, the boats do too. And like when you'll start to lift up, whether it be courage with everything around you, everything else starts to lift. Because like you said, nature love courage, the universe will guide you into the channeling you're meant to do. And like if you're just showing up within your own self, right? And so I think coming from that, as a CEO yourself, what's the biggest thing you face on a day-to-day basis, or what's the hardest thing you have to deal with in your position?
Yeah, look, good question. My life's changed really rapidly the last 2 years, I guess. And it's great. It's everything I've wanted it to go with. I think the biggest pressure I have with the industry I do is understanding that I'm playing with people's lives. And so not going so corporate where it's like you're not giving every player like the dedication they deserve in terms of like where they're going, how you help them, et cetera, et cetera. You know, like this is, you know, like at the end of the day, like everything I do with this business, I'm doing for like the 17-year-old version of me. Like it's...
yeah, I love that, man.
Know,
yeah, I love that.
Having that check and like, you know, really trying not to... Because, you know, when you're running a business, like it's not that fun, you know? You got to like there's a lot of decisions you got to make, and there's... in order to grow it, like you do have to think about the finances, you do have to think about how money's coming in, you have to think about how to grow it, and you know, the more people you bring in, the more complex everything sort of gets. And so like even within the last year, we went from like a team of 3 to like a team of 8 now.
Awesome.
And so, you know, that's not an easy transition. And for me right now, I'm really figuring out how to step back a bit and not to be so like, no, this has to be this way or this has to be that way, and sort of teach others and trying to like really grow to be able to help more players. Because at the end of the day, like if it's just me and Dad, there's only like a certain amount of people that we can actually help if we're doing every single part of the process, right? So hardest thing is just understanding that, especially for me right now, it's like I have to do stuff that I've never done before. And it feels like the early days of the business when you're looking at what you want to do and you have no idea how to do it because you've never done it before. And then there's a point in the business where you go, okay, now I understand every single part of the funnel and everything needs to get done. But then after you get around that, you want to hire more people. Now it's like, well, now I need to do stuff I've never done. I got to make systems. I got to hire people. I got to think about how to grow the company and do stuff that's actually scary, which I love because it keeps getting me out of bed in the morning. Because if I was still doing the other stuff, you know, like it'd be mundane. Like the money's never going to be enough in terms of, you know, which goes back to what we're talking about. But me going, okay, what's the biggest scary thing that I want to do that looks cool, that's going to help the players? All right, that's what I'll focus on. But then I got to fight like procrastination on like, you know, every day because it's, yeah, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I think, you know, you said something before, you know, you wouldn't do stuff what you wouldn't do to your 17-year-old self. I think that's really important to have in a business model and a business concept. And I think, you know, coming into more deep into the business, like where, you know, you're meeting with the royal family in Dubai, walk me through the stages of that. How did that even like come to fruition? How, you know, talk to me about, you know, getting to that level of professionalism, you know, royalty. How did you get there? What's this thing? What were sort of the things what stemmed circling that? Yeah,
so that was an unreal experience. I've got to give all credit to the old man, to Dad. So he initially, when I was younger, he worked in UAE for a couple of years. So he made a bunch of contacts there. He was working for someone else. Let's just call it real estate stuff that he was doing. And so he had a few contacts, a few different people, and he was, you know, unfortunately never made real money from it because all the deals just fell through. But he kept the contacts, right? And look, I think as you keep growing something, it's crazy because the bigger you get, the easier everything else becomes. Because the more people that want to work with you, the more people that reach out, the more podcast episodes you're gonna do, the more people are gonna reach out, and you're like, okay, I can now pick. You know, it's not just like 3, it's 50. And so I think it's the same thing with any business. It's like the bigger you get, the more people that want to collaborate, want to do something with you. And so I think it was a mix of, we already had the company at a certain point, and then Dad's work of reaching out to a few different people, and then honestly just timing. Like there's things that you just can't.
Divine timing, hey, yeah. What a beautiful thing.
It's just like something that people aren't actually aware of. I don't think it's a very common thing in the football world, but a lot of times agents work with other agents. So I might have contacts that this other agent doesn't have, but he has a really good player, and so he might reach out to us, and if we can get his player through, we then split the contract percentage-wise, right? And so people don't actually know that that's what agents do as well. So sometimes they think, oh, agent's taking like 10% or whatever, but sometimes it's only like 5% because it's split, or sometimes it's even less, like 3.3 because it's split 3 ways. And so that was the situation we were in with sort of this big player going, you know, Iniesta going to Dubai. Like we played a bit of a role in that. As minor as it is, you know, it's still what it was. And I think, yeah, it's just surreal. Like the Al-Qasimi family is, you know, huge. And like culture-wise and going there and going back to what you said about imposter syndrome, like I felt it 100%.
Yeah, you would have, man.
Like sitting there and just going like, I remember I was shooting bricks when it was the second day, and we got taken to like the palace. So one of them has like this palace, and it was like a compound, like a full, like gated, like you walk in and he's got like 15 cars, you know, lined up the front.
Well,
like,
they're all probably $1 million plus each.
Yeah. And you get there and, you know, like we've got photos and videos of it, and like, which like they allowed us to film, like awesome. And, you know, you walk in, take your shoes off, and like, there's just, it's a very common thing in the Middle East where like, in UAE specifically, where like they have like big rooms and it's like couches like all around the side of the rooms. And so they'll have like the whole family and like some cousins and friends or whatever, that they might all do different businesses, they work on different things or whatever, but they all come to like whoever the sort of boss is, I guess, for that region. So where we were staying was just like an hour away from Dubai. It's called Ras Al Khaimah. And so I'm probably boring you with this, but...
No, I'm loving it, man. Keep going. Tell me everything.
And so in Ras Al Khaimah, it's pretty much going to be like the next Miami. Like if Dubai's LA, Ras Al Khaimah is going to be Miami, right?
Yeah, okay, gotcha.
And so the boss, right, everyone sort of goes to his house every day at like a certain time, like 2 certain times. One's like in the morning at 11 and the other time's like at 6, 7 at night. And they all just have, like, you got the, not the slaves, but like, it might as well be like the people that are like giving teas and biscuits or whatever. Like they just sort of serve you, the servers, I guess. But, you know, walking into that room and you've got 20-ish blokes that you know all a part of the royal family, like, in some way. But then, man, you sit down and you're just like, start cracking jokes. And, you know, it's people with completely different culture and you just realise we're all just human. Like, we're all just doing the same thing. Like, just because this dude has, like, a couple $1 billion, like, you know?
Just a couple. Yeah,
it's just like, it doesn't actually mean anything. Like something something that it should have stayed with me so long, but it has. I remember when I was like a driving instructor, taught me before my test, he went, just chill out. Don't forget that your instructor, your driver, when he's doing that test, he's probably thinking about the holiday that's coming up in 2 weeks. He's probably thinking about what he's having for lunch. Like, it's not that deep. And that's stayed with me. And I'd like take that same energy with, like, whenever I get nervous, it's like, Locke is just another bloke, you know?
Yeah.
We're living like on the same rock.
Yeah.
And like that proved to me, like, it was hard for me to figure out what I was going to connect with these people because I was so young and like these dudes are like, you know, in their 50s, a lot of them. But you find something with everyone. I can't say what it was with this guy, but like once you find it, you crack a couple of jokes.
Yeah.
It's done. That's all it is.
It's funny you say that, you know, the imposter, even leading up to this episode, it's like, oh, what are we going to connect on? It's just like, you know, like, I was just like, certain, I was even calling James, I was like, man, you know, what's going on? And then I sort of checked myself, I was like, just have a healthy conversation, you know, like just a genuine conversation. I think that's the beauty about podcasting, and I think the beauty about, you know, having that realization in your own life is like, things not that deep, you know, like I said before, all just, at the end of the day, we're just like a bag of meat spinning on a rock in the middle of nowhere, you know. It's like, don't take things so seriously that you know, the coffee and the jeans, went to the wrong way to work, 5 minutes late, oh fuck, you know, it's like 100%. Just relax. And
everyone's got value to bring. Like, I've got stuff from my driving instructor that I met twice.
Yeah.
You know, that I still hold today.
I think that's powerful, man. It's like the people who I've met have. It's usually the people who you don't think would mean a lot to you that actually mean the most, whether it be a value they express, or, you know, as simple as a quote, or even as simple as a smile, or like a hey on the side of the street. You know, it's like even just like driving past someone and you can see them singing in the car.
Yeah,
it's like that would bring a smile to my face. Like, fuck yeah, they're living their life. So like, what's my life got to do with, you know, my emotions right now? It's like, yeah, you can feel all these emotions. Feel them, let them come and go, but don't sit in it and dwell on, you know. I think coming from, you know, you being in a room in a palace in the UAE with 50 billionaires, what's the main thing you took from that whole experience?
Good question. So I've really got to check myself with this because, like I said before, I'm someone that just forgets about a lot. So I got to really think about it. But I think we're not that far from the levels we think are out of reach.
I love that. Yeah.
I think we put a lot of I think we, as humans, we distance ourselves a lot from people. We look at, you know, maybe Bo, you had Bo last week on the podcast, you know, I think a lot of people would distance themselves from him, right? At one point in his life, and then now maybe they feel a bit closer, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's, nail on the head.
And I think it's the same thing. It just, the more you do the more you experience and the more you sort of get out there out of your comfort zone and really push that extreme, the more you understand how possible everything actually is. And so you sort of click a switch in your brain, like you were saying about baseball before, like you felt like you were the man and you were actually like that good. And I could probably bet that you were actually probably really good for a time while you believed that. And I think it's the same thing. As long as you actually believe it, and if you're blessed by having like actually being put in that surrounding to see it, it's just going to affirm it. And if you feel that shit, like it just opens it up. You go, actually, this isn't that far away. I guess one of them did give me a piece of advice as well.
I love that. I love to pick all their brains, hey, just sit in a room and just like gather wisdom.
It was, definitely, there's, I don't know how much I can say. So I don't want to say too much on everything, but there was so much and stuff that happened that you just go, this is another world. Like, even little things like they would, like none of them would like eat dinner with their wives or anything. Like I was spending from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m. with them every day. Like if we weren't doing stuff, we were just sitting around having coffee and all on our phones working or whatever. Every day. Like crazy different culture as well. One of them gave me a piece of advice. It was actually one of the like the financial advisors of one of them. Mm-hmm. So a good bloke to ask. And he goes, Alan, like, you gave me a compliment, like, you've got your head screwed on, like, you're young, you've got plenty of time. Biggest thing you need to do is focus on building the best garden you can. Like, don't focus attracting butterflies. Build the best garden.
Because gardens will attract the butterflies.
Gardens will attract the butterflies. So pretty much what you're saying, like just make that foundation and have the money come to you. Like you said, money comes to you. Don't go chasing money. Make it come to you. Like build something that attracts it. And like he's spot on, like with it. Because I think it came from the back of a comment that I made where I said like, do you guys even work? Because I remember like just looking at like the way that we're doing stuff, and I was like, you know, back home I'm like grinding like on my computer, like I'm, you know, getting stuff done. And he was just like, build the garden, and then it's gonna come to you.
That's beautiful, man. It's like, yeah, I can definitely resonate with that as well. In so many facets of life too, hey. And, you know, coming from your experience in Dubai, were you there for the elite football, or were you there to like develop players?
So yeah, we were there for the football, for elite football. We were there only for a couple of weeks, and just sort of signed a few agreements with clubs there and with these guys, and tried to sort of develop. But a lot of that stuff's going to come to fruition in a few years, I think, just because they're a bit virgin when it comes to football. So they're probably a bit behind like Europe and, you know, places that have the structure in place. But yeah, I can't wait to be able to hang out. And also the nicest people as well. Like the super welcoming, like can't say a bad word about anyone.
Where do you see the business in 10 years? What's the ultimate goal?
10 years. Look, the reason I started it was to help amateur players, right? And so I never want to stop doing that. I think I want to get it to a place where we're doing it at a bigger scale, right? You know, a big motivating factor for me, and this might come down to the ego, is that I do want to like step on the competition, you know, like ants, I guess, but it's only because they're doing the wrong thing. You know, there's a lot of tours, a lot of like experience-based stuff, academies, whatever, that I think are just like a plague to the industry.
But I think that's coming from a very good place, like a very good place in your heart, you know? Yeah. So I wouldn't bring that down to ego. It's like, I'd bring it down to that part of you where you were, you know, disadvantaged of an opportunity, you know, several years ago, and, you know, you want to, it's almost like you have a bit of resentment towards 100%. That, and you want to crush them like ants. I do the same thing, mate.
Yeah.
So I think I wouldn't bring that down to an ego point of view.
Okay.
I think that would definitely bring it down to like the place in your heart where you're like, just like you feel sorry for your 17-year-old self. So and you don't want to put other people through that, And I think that's a really good trait to have, which you're obviously channeling it in the right direction for sure.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, look, it's something that really gets me, because I like, especially with the, like on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, like I purposely only click on football ads on anyone doing any of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because I just want, like, that's the only thing I want to see. And it just like, there's no bigger motivator, I guess, every day to sort of go, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. But look, 10 years, there's a lot. I think I'd love to have separate departments. So besides like the stuff like having a headquarters here on the Gold Coast, like a massive place, and having the whole team actually working together, not just online like everyone is. And then also like having a place, even just like to give free advice. Like I'd love to have that headquarters and have like set times where you can book in to speak to like someone that works with me, where people just go and go, hey, I'm talking to this academy or whatever, like, I don't know if this is good or not. Can you check it? And we actually just help people, just for free. Like, I'd love to, building a business and trying to make money, like, a big part of me right now is like, damn, like, I wish I could make my events cheaper right now. Like, I wish I could figure it out, but it's always like, if I do that, I have to sacrifice on the value that I bring. And so it's a bit of like a, something I've got to figure out. And I think once we, start working with professional players and having the department of fully professionals, which we already have a few, but that's a different game, like it's, like I know what we need to do to get there, and I would have done it earlier, and I think a lot of people only do that because it's a bit easier, but I just, didn't want to leave the amateur players, like the core, but yeah, for sure, 10 years, have like a full professional department that only manages the professional players and those amateur players that we've helped transition, and use that money to then, filter back into like the amateur side, and do you know what I mean? To just keep pushing that. But there's heaps of things where I want to take it.
Unreal, man. How many players do you have under your wing at the moment?
In terms of signed professionally or just?
Oh, across the board.
Across the board, like over 100.
Nice.
Yeah, so at any given moment, we'd have like at least 50 players that we're just sort of managing.
So in terms of like drafting them into the professional sides of things, like guiding them into the direction, lifting the roof off their cage, how does that look like for you in terms of, do you have a set sort of regime of they have to fit this certain criteria, you then offload that to professional teams overseas and then they sort of pick and choose? Or do you just get the boys, get them over there and just get them on the pitch with the professional teams? Good
question. This is a question I get a lot from parents and players, and they'll sort of say to me like, do you think I can go pro? Right? I think it's a similar way of asking that question.
Yeah.
And it's like, I've had experiences in the past that have like showed me that, when we first started, we go, okay, we have this gun player. And actually, Jimmy can actually attest to this player after the podcast. He's going to make it, like 100%. He's the best we've seen here. He's going to go overseas and he's going to smash it. Gets over there, misses his mum, misses his sister, his dog, his routine, his PlayStation. And all of a sudden, like, cracks, right? Waste of money, waste of everything. I've had players that I held at the start where I go, pretty average, but whatever, like, we're still honest, we'll still help. They go over and they get a scholarship or a contract. And so that opens your eyes, because you go, okay, maybe my opinion doesn't matter as much as I think it does. Maybe seeing someone for 3 days at an event or seeing someone's highlights isn't actually enough. And so while, like, the way I sort of run my agency and what I instill in the people that are working under me is we always need to be transparent and honest about what it is we can actually do for the player and where they're going to be and what their like chances are, right? And so if you see highlights, if you see them at events, whatever, make an opinion, give the player that to go, hey, I think you might actually be better going as high as possible, or hey man, I actually think we should try a bit lower, right? But at the end of the day, if a player says to me, no, I want to try as high as possible, I'll be like, all right, if they don't have the level and they're going to embarrass my brand or whatever, maybe I'll say, well, you can't, right? But if, maybe I'll meet them in the middle. It might not be a Div 1 club, it might be a Div 2 club, right? And so I work around that way, because at the end of the day as well, like if a player wants to go high, and I've done this in the past, and I convince them to go low, and they go low, and then they get offered something. They go to 4th division and they get offered a contract. Mentally, he's like, I should have gone higher. And then that is just a fuck around in of itself, because then at the end of the day, like, he's got to kick the ball. He's got to live that life, I play a very small role in his mind every day, right? Might be a bigger role in his football career, but it's only moments that I play, right? Oh, sorry, not me, the company. And so it's about finding that balance of, like, I never want to turn away like an amateur player, but sometimes I'm like, maybe you need to, like, develop a bit more, which we can provide, and have that honest conversation. But yeah, that sort of makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Do you think, coming out of that, telling a player who might not have the potential as reaching Div 1, with them hitting Div 4, do you think they would find a lot more satisfaction in the outcome of that?
I think players, look, the mental side of things in football is huge. It's like 80%, easily 80%. And I've had players that go low when they want to go high because their parents, a bit like my mum wanting me to go to uni, their parents are like, hey, it's our money, we can't afford, like, to send you over too long, go lower, be more realistic, right? And they do that, they get it, and then they don't want to accept it. And so that puts me in a shit situation, because I got to tell the club, like, actually, no, I can't, and then I can't promote this player either, because, so all this work kind of goes down the drain. And so it's tough to say if they would, appreciate that or whatever, because from my experience, they don't. They just have, like, a mental block and go, like, I got to go higher.
Yeah. And
then they do, and then sometimes it doesn't work out, and they want to go back lower, and it's gone, And now it's just, like, the football world it's tough, man. It's not easy on its own, and it's not easy even, like, going through someone like me. Like, it's still a tough game to get across the line.
For sure. I think coming onto the back of that again, where do you, the players you have at the moment, how many of them are sort of in the direction of reaching a professional team? Or is it tough to answer?
Yeah, that's really hard for me to comment on. Like, I'll explain why. It's one thing going from amateur player in Australia, for example, to getting a contract for a youth team in first division, second division, third division in Spain, right? Which I have players that have done it this year already with 4 of them. That's one battle, right? But then the other battle is playing that first season there, even though the club might be paying for your whole everything for the year, they're paying you a wage, like whatever, and you feel like King Dick. You've then got to make it from there to the next team the next year. Because if you don't do that, like, bye. Like, the football world is unforgiving. Like, it's a business. And so it's hard for me to, like, give you that data. I haven't been doing it that long to be able to give you, like, the data of how many, I know what my success rate is from full amateur to getting them across the line for the starter thing. I don't know how many of them then progress to the, like, TV professional first division, right? Which is something that I want to make in my life's work, obviously. Like, 10 years' time, dream, like, having players, 5 or 6 players representing Australia. I want them to be represented by elite football. Like, there's stuff like that I want to make happen. And I hope it's sort of amateurs that transition, not just pro players that came to me to help, because it's a different feeling. But, yeah, tough question.
Fair enough. What's been the biggest thing you've noticed in your own growth as a person from beginning this whole journey until now?
I've got so much more. So much more to grow. I'm definitely very incomplete right now.
But do you find satisfaction in where you're at the moment because it's on the journey to greatness?
Yeah, 100%. Like, I hope so.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't give it too much thought. It's more like, it's like, it reminds me of another quote, like, I don't know if you ever heard it. Every man is guilty of all the good they didn't do. And to me, it's like, I try and like, just walk that path and not think too much about like how I'm growing or like whatever. And just more like different demons come up as you go along. Like, you know, you slay some of them now, but then in 2 years, I'm sure I'm going to be in a different position. I've got others to slay. So it's more like you're always chasing something that you can't actually achieve. Like, I'm never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be like the best Christian. I'm never going to follow like Jesus perfectly. I'm never going to, you know, make every single person proud or be everyone's cup of tea. And it's just about like, I guess I'm happy, you know, of the progress that I've made.
Yeah, for sure.
I definitely, you know, if I let my ego tell me, I'll be like, oh, you're a bit better than other 25-year-olds or whatever.
Yeah.
But it really depends who you're comparing yourself to at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like you got to shut all those voices down because it's what we went back to, like, it doesn't matter, and it's not something that I think you should care about. Like, focus on getting better, but try and forget, like, you know, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense.
No, I get it. That's funny you say that in the respect to comparing, because I can find myself doing the same thing. I can do it in the podcast space. I can do it within my own self. Within my own self. I can also do it to the people around me. And I conceived a bit of advice from a very close friend of mine. I actually had him on the pod, Benny Garrell. He is the most beautiful human on the planet. He is. His soul is. He is. I admire him so much. He's like, just the way he moves through life is just so beautiful and so placid. And it's just, he's really good to have in my corner. And I was talking to him about the way I can find myself comparing myself to other people in the podcast space. You know, to myself, I'm not where I want to be, so why aren't I there yet? You know what I mean? Those sort of stuff I say to myself. And he looked at me and he goes, man, if you want to play the comparing game, you have to play it fairly. Compare yourself to who you were 2 years ago. Compare yourself to the person you were 5 years ago, you know. Compare yourself to the person who, you know, when you were partying every single day, you know, when you didn't sleep for days on end. Compare yourself to the person then to who you are now. And I was like, fuck. That is fucking sick, you know. Yeah. And so I think having that, you know, reinforced into my own mind, it's like, I've still got so much to grow, don't get me wrong. And I know what's going to happen, all in good time, right?
Yeah, you
it's
versus
like,
you.
Yeah, divine timing. It's like if I can just narrow, it's like the energy I put into comparing myself to other people, that could be spent comparing myself, well, not comparing myself, I could be spending that energy into this space, into the things I want to do, the channeling my passion, everything about it, you know what I mean? And I think to anyone listening out there who does find themselves comparing, compare yourself to who you were 5 years ago. Compare yourself to the person who you were 2 years ago, you know. And so I think that is such an important lesson I've had to learn recently. Sure. I think to sort of close up the episode, what's the worst advice you've ever received and why?
Worst advice? Ooh. I don't really know, actually. I think... I don't know if it's advice per se, but the early sort of years, I'd say understand why people are giving you the advice that they're giving you. I think a lot of people had really good intentions for me, people that love me and want the best for me, but their advice was based off of their fears and their experiences in what life should be. I don't know if that is a bit of a cheat code.
No, yeah, I get it for sure.
Because I think, you know, a lot of, you know, you get pressured into maybe going to uni or thinking about working this. Like I've always had people tell me not to do something. Like I quit my 9 to 5 during COVID when I wasn't making any money. Like I didn't have any money from any of the other businesses. And I had every single person tell me, like, don't quit now. Like you're lucky that, you know, I was working at Kmart. Like you're lucky that you have a job. So many people just got let out or whatever, because that was the reality that they were seeing. But that was the best thing I ever did, because it's like I had all this time to actually do what I wanted to do. Like what better time to actually do what you want to do when you're like early 20s and actually working, actually living at home with your parents and you have no responsibilities. And I think that my whole life has sort of went that way. Like, oh, you just started making money with elite football. Like, are you really going to invest $30,000 in your first trip overseas? Go to zero. Why don't you save a bit of it? Best decision I made, you know? And that whole thing just keeps happening. So, yeah.
That rings true. I think, you know, I think all in all, the only advice we are able to give as humans are based off our own experiences through life. And, you know, I might have different advice to a certain subject to what you do. Same with James outside, same with, you know, everyone around us, right? And I think that's very important to understand, is try and understand the advice people are giving you. I love that. I just learned that. I love that, man. Thank you for sharing. What would be the best advice you've ever received, and why?
Best advice. Damn, I should have come prepared for this. Look, go all in. I think we're too busy, for lack of a better word, pussyfooting life. You know, we're too afraid, or we let fear dictate too much, or we let status, or we let comparison, or whatever it is, dictate our choices in life, and we forget that everything is a choice. We forget that, like, you don't have to do that job if you don't want to. You're just too scared about leaving it to find something else. You don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. And I understand there's, you know, it's not for everyone. Like, if you've got a kid and whatever, I understand all that sort of stuff. But at a certain point, like, I do think everything's an excuse, really, because it is always a choice. And so, yeah, go all in. It'll change your life. Like, you'll be a happier person as well. I think you'd be surprised how much happier you are if you actually just do it. Nike, just do it.
Love that, man. That rings true. I think a lot of people will be impacted by that statement as well. I think a lot of us, we hold ourselves back from the reality we want, for the reality we have. You know, it's because it's comfortable. It's contentment. It's, you know, like I think we all sort of struggle to push past our own boundaries in certain aspects towards the goal we want, because we need to have X amount of dollars for this bill, X amount of, you know, love and energy for that person, or whatever it is. So going all in, that's, like, picture perfect advice. Like, yeah, I agree. And lastly, if you were to have anything to say to someone who was struggling, what would it be and why?
Struggling. Just in general, struggling?
Across the board, brother.
Perception is projection. Unfortunately, the hardest times, like, require the most amount of faith, the most amount of hope. Look to something, you know, obviously, like the classics, like your friends or Jesus or whatever it might be for you, but understand that we do actually create our reality. And as much, like, you being the man at baseball and performing like the man because you thought, I'm the best player on this pitch, if we all carried that same belief, if we convinced ourselves, like, truly that we are X person, you start to become that person. And so whether you're struggling with something, like, just understand that how you're looking at it is what you're seeing. Like, if you're driving along and you're looking at all the red cars, you're going to find a lot of red cars, right? And so it's the same thing. Like, if you're looking at every single negative thing in your life, that's all you're ever going to see. Like, you got to really, I'm someone that doesn't even look at negatives because I forget about them. But a lot of stuff happens, and I've got friends that constantly talk to me about the negative stuff that happens to them because that's what they're focusing on, you know? And I've got to really go, hey, man, look, all this stuff happened to me as well this week. I'm just letting you know that. But I didn't even think about it till, like, you started thinking negative, because then I thought, oh, what happened to me? So I could like, compare and be like, hey, man, you're not alone, but you're taking it too deep. And so that's what I'd say, like, be aware of what you're focusing on.
I love that, man. Thank you so much for sharing. This has been such an incredible episode. I'm so stoked for it to come out. Thank you for sharing your valuable time. I know you're heading over to Europe soon again, so just want to wish you all the best, and I'll be following very, very closely from now on. So definitely glad that I've sort of made a friendship along the way, just like I do all the time. So
You're too lucky.
Thank you so much, brother. I really, really, really appreciate your time today, man.
No, likewise. Awesome pod, and I think you're going to do really, really big things.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate the support. Big love.